Loops 45. 45.1, Master Weaver. Welcome to the annual romance throw. Give it up for our reigning champions, Shining Armor, and me Amor Cadenza. I keep telling them, it's Cadence, the alicorn mock whined as she trotted onto the arena and waved at her screaming fans. They just don't listen these days, do they? The unicorn beside her sadly shaking his head and giving a sly wink to a group of fan fillies who instantly fainted. Today, they will be facing their longtime rivals, Spike Thesaurus and Lady Rarity. A purple dragon marched slowly onto the field, rearing up for a dramatic roar as the mare lounging on his scales waved to the crowd. Hello there, dearies. It is wonderful to see you all again. And finally, an unexpected challenger. Some pony that will most definitely surprise you, because she isn't really a pony. Ladies and gentlemen, I give you Chrysalis, Queen of Changelings. Columns of green flames burst around the arena as a tall form flew from the shadows, landing between the two surprised competitor teams. Well. It's good to see you all. Wait a minute, this is a partner sport. Spike pointed out. Who are you going to owe? Oh no. Oh yes. Chrysalis's partner is none other than me. A blue unicorn leapt out of the announcer's box. Give it up for the great and powerful Trixie. / 45.2, Master Weaver. Wait a minute, Cookie said suddenly. You all still remember old Holly Hooves? Scoot-a-loo, Sweetie Belle, and Apple Bloom shared a look. Well, he's kinda a story. The Earth Pony chuckled awkwardly. For little fillies and colts. A big jolly reindeer comes down the chimney and sticks gifts in stockings, Sweetie Belle explained. I personally thought it was an adorable old pony's tale, but... Old pony's tale? Pansy cried in shock. That caribou was one of the bravest heroes of our generation. Clover sighed. Pansy, dear, our own story was sanitized over the generations. As great as Holly was, the fact is Krampus could give nightmares to foals. Scoot-a-loo raised an eyebrow. Krampus? I don't think I know that name. And there you have it, Smart Cookie said wearily. Without the villain, Holly becomes nothing more than a nice gift giver. Apple Bloom smiled to herself. Maybe y'all could set the record straight then. Who was Krampus, and how was old Holly Hooves a hero? For a moment, the necklaces were silent. You have to understand, Clover began slowly, the fire of friendship only worked in a localized area. Even while we were expanding Equestria, a lot of the land was still covered in ice and snow. Still, there were a lot of opportunistic groups out there, Smart Cookie continued. They'd set off, a union of the three tribes, and found settlements in hopes of repelling the Wendigos. Sometimes it worked, sometimes it didn't. Some of my own kin were part of one of those groups, Pansy commented. They bravely went back north, not to the old lands, but, well, they built themselves a little village. It was a fairly normal settlement, we'd get reports back, but then 1 month, nothing. Scoot-a-loo patted her necklace gently. It must have been hard, not knowing what happened. I assumed they'd been buried in the snow. Pansy sighed. There was a country to run, and I couldn't afford to go looking for them. No pony blames you, Smart Cookie offered gently. We couldn't have known about him. Sweetie Belle gulped. About, who, exactly? Krampus the Black. Without warning, Clover projected a holographic image of a horned, shaggy-furred biped, whip in hand and red eyes glaring. A satyr sorcerer who enslaved the village. The manacles he wore granted him power so long as weariness and despair were abundant. But with the Wendigos retreating, she trailed off. Apple Bloom's eyes widened. He needed to find a new source of suffering to power his magic. And here was this village of ponies, right on his doorstep. The necklace around Bloom's neck glowed angrily. Krampus was a monster, in form and in heart. He would break the legs of ponies who defied him, and whip those he considered too slow in their so-called work. Mare, stallion, foal, Pegasus, unicorn, earth pony. He treated all with equal cruelty, making them labor in the snow whenever suited him. They took to sticking warm coals in their stockings just to fight off the cold. Sweetie Belle stared at the image before her. I take it this is where old Holly Hooves comes in. Indeed. With a slight shift, the necklace around Belle's neck changed the image to a noble, elderly caribou with a thick white beard and piercing eyes. The Caribou clan has always had a connection with wind, being able to hear the whispers from miles away. Their elders have even managed flight, sometimes. And when Holly Hooves heard the cries of pain and anguish on the wines, he was so moved he had to act. Scootaloo was now completely enraptured by the story. So, what did he do? He did what I would have done, Pansy replied gravely. He provided for those under his protection, by having his tribe mates sequester gifts of food and clothing in secret to the village, and sought out a way to defeat Krampus, by tracking down the beings who made his manacles in the first place. Mountain elves, Clover elaborated. Very rare, very isolated. Presumably there was some sort of war that nearly wiped them out. Whatever the case, Holly found them, asked for their help. They forged him a chain of bells that would neutralize elvish magic, but only if it was fueled by hope and joy. And in return he swore his clan to their protection. Smart Cookie glowed with pride. They say the battle lasted a full day. Even after the chains were fueled by the hope of the village, Krampus and Holly dueled in a blistering snowstorm. I don't know how much of that was exaggerated, but in the end old Holly Hooves won. There was a great celebration in the village. The ponies made robes for the elves, bread was broken with the caribou, a message was sent out to us, detailing the whole thing, but by the time we arrived they had all gone. Wow! Apple Bloom breathed out. Ah, did not even realize. She looked at the painting of a smiling reindeer with new eyes. And that's our last y'all heard of them. I did meet him much later, Pansy admitted. When I was very old. Traveling north, I saw a glacier in the shape of a caribou skull, and inside, a coven of elves making toys, with the old deer himself at their head. He explained that the bells which bound Krampus would need to be, well, refueled soon, so he'd come up with an idea to spread gifts to the little ones in a nearby village. I advised him to do so around Hearth's warming eve, so as to capitalize on the emotion. I suppose that's how the story was revitalized. After a moment, the necklace sighed. I don't understand how the chimney thing came about, though. / 45.3, Chrysalis. Twilight honestly wondered why variant loops set in the Canterlot High School universe, that strange alternate version of Equestria where every pony she knew had a human counterpart, weren't more common. She'd certainly prefer this place to that alternate Ponyville where Rainbow Dash always dresses in style. The good news for this loop was that finally, the other elements were awake for it. She could now actually explore this place with her friends rather than startlingly accurate facsimiles. The bad news started when the zombies showed up. Not just normal zombies, but the ones with ridiculous variations like wearing road cones and buckets on their heads, pole vaulters, bobslayers, and other types she'd have rather never seen again. And the only viable long-term defense were those cartoony animate plants. She may have had access to world-shaking magic and weapons, but even her reserves weren't nearly as inexhaustible as the zombies seemed to be. It was another fused loop with that universe. And no forewarning to check her sanity at the door. So, what's the deal with Crazy Dave anyway? Is he the anchor from wherever these things are normally from? Rainbow asked her after a particularly brutal wave. Thankfully, no brains had been eaten yet. At least not those of any pony's counterpart she knew. The attacks let up often enough that basic necessities like food and utilities could be gathered before hunkering back down and waiting for the next attack. She and her friends had taken to sleeping in shifts so that there was always at least two of them awake in case extreme gardening skills were needed. Maybe, Twilight responded tiredly. No one can really tell. Think we could ask Sleipnir to check the next time we see him. Rainbow suggested. Already did that, Twilight told her friend. Apparently he is the designated anchor for his universe, but his code is so incomprehensible that even the Yggdrasil admins can't tell if he's actually looping or if his universe stabilized on its own. And they don't want to try triggering others from his universe to start looping until they figure it out. Hey! Rainbow scrunched her face in confusion. How can the beings that run reality not understand him enough to tell if he's looping? Twilight gave Rainbow a flat stare. Because he's crazy. / 45.4. In the dank gloom of the ever-free forest, a predator moved on silent feet. Moving lightly over the leaf litter, the predator's eyes flickered all around. Her nostrils scented the air, trying to gain the slimmest edge. There! The predator bounded forwards, pushing off with all her might and soaring over a brook towards her goal. There were several seconds of snarling, growling tussle, and then predator and target separated. Both were bleeding, but the cuts were superficial, and they darted off into the undergrowth once more. How long are they going to take? Spike asked, hovering on a thermal. It's been 5 hours. No idea. Twilight trimmed her wings to catch the same thermal, and then soared up and around her assistant. Suppose they'll just have to work it out for themselves. She rolled onto her back, grinning. Ah, I'm not a Pegasus nearly enough. A heavy paw slammed Gilda's beak into the ground, making her see stars. Snapping out her wings, she forced the other off her and lashed backwards with her hind paws hoping to catch her target with them. No such luck. The only warning she got, as she righted herself and made to turn, was a moment's rustling leaves. Then a weight landed on her back, forcing her back to the forest floor. White teeth flashed near her throat for a second, and she went limp. Okay, she said after a moment. You win. 17-14. The wolf closed her jaws, and carefully backed off Gilda's side. Then it blurred, and Fluttershy stood there. Thank you for your understanding. Understanding? Gilda pawed at her beak to get some of the mud off. Pwah. Anyway, take it from one predator to another. I get the whole dominance issues thing. It's better we get it out of the way now. Fluttershy nodded, her cheeks slightly colored. I'll win next time, though. The pale yellow Pegasus gave Gilda a look which was surprisingly arch. Maybe. Okay, we've had the fight, what now? Well, Fluttershy shuffled her paws. I did get hold of some rather nice hadrosaur meat last loop. There was a chance. Dinosaur meat. Gilda's eyes lit up. I am so there. There we go, Twilight said, nodding with satisfaction. That's that. I heard something about dinosaur meat, Spike trailed off. Any chance I could get some with gemstones roasted in? I think you'll have to ask Fluttershy. Twilight waggled her wings. I'm not willing to speak for her. Sure. He made a ponderous turn towards Ponyville, with Twilight accelerating to ride his slipstream. Any chance you could get me something from the next time you encounter a silicon-based creature? I'll think about it. / 45.5, Indolicio. Shining woke to the gentle rocking of the ocean. I'm in a boat, and it's night, specifically, a small ship with one mast, that seemed to have seen more than its fair share of years. And I'm wearing a mask, and have a rapier by my side. Then his loop memories set in. Cadence is in danger. Looking ahead, he could see another small ship ahead of him, in the distance, and yes, searching his memories, they were heading to the cliffs of insanity. Who names these places? He snorted with disdain. He considered jumping from the boat and swimming the remaining distance, but loop memories kicked in again. Right, eels. The dawn was ascending and the ship up ahead had docked at the cliffs. Arriving, himself, all he found was a length of rope that went straight up the cliff. Looking at his hooves, and looking at the rope. You've got to be kidding me. It had taken a few moments, but he'd heard about gravity shifting spells from his sister, and this was as good a time as any to try them out. It was now the reason he was galloping up the cliff's face, where ironically, upon reaching the top, he now stood face to face with that very same sister. "Hey BBBFF. Twily?" he asked, shocked. "Well, here it's Twilingo Montoya, dashing and revenge-driven sort's mare. Wait. Are we in the Princess Bride? You're the stallion in black, the dread pirate Black Mask. I knew this somehow seemed familiar. The cliffs of insanity should have given it away. Anyway, there's Big Mac and Spike ahead of us as Mazik and Spike and I. Cadence is awake, but those two aren't. Great. I'll see you later." Moving to leave, he was pulled back by a purple, kinetic tug. Twilight nervously hooved the ground. "Shiny, I was kinda wondering if we could duel." "What? Now?" Twilight's eyes grew big. "Please." Shining sighed. "Fine." A thrown rock smashed close to him. He'd been running in pursuit of Cadence and the remaining two, finally ending in a rocky gorge. Enob. Big Mac, or Mazik as he was known here, trotted out from behind a rock. It was sight he'd remember for a very long time, as you don't often see Mac dressed in a turban and vest. Doing his best to stifle any laughter, he replied. "Now what? You put down your sword and magic, I put down my rock, we settle this like civilized folks. Hoof to hoof. Sports pony like. Aha! Sports pony like." Shining chuckled nervously. Big Mac went down with a large thud, unconscious. "Sorry, about that." "Oh right. What was the line?" "Dream about large mares." Shining grabbed his sword in his telekinesis and raced after Spikeneye and Cadence. Shining was seated across from Spikeneye and a blindfolded Cadence out in an open field. 2 glasses of wine sat on a stump in front of him. Awake or not, I don't actually want to kill Spike, thought Shining. 20 minutes earlier. "Shiny, thanks for the duel," said a lightly panting Twilight. "One more thing. Awake or not? Please don't kill Spike." "What did you have in mind?" "Oh. I know." Twilight reached into her subspace pocket, and pulled out a vial. "This is a sleeping dust. It's odorless, but works when you inhale it, so don't do that. You should be able to figure out the rest." "Thanks, Twily." Shining cried as he dashed off. Back to the present. Shining reached into saddlebags and removed the vial Twilight gave him. "Inhale this but do not touch," cautioned Shining. "I smell nothing," replied Spike. "What you do not smell is called iocane powder. It's odorless, tasteless, dissolves instantly in liquid, and is one of the more deadly poisons known to equines." Shining then took the cups and placed them behind him for a few moments, and before bringing them back and placing them on the stump. "All right. Where is the poison? The battle of wits has begun. It ends when you decide and we both drink and find out who is right, and who is dead." Spikeneye. Spikeneye. Spikeneye responded by falling over, asleep. "Hey. Wasn't sure it'd work that fast. SNNXXZ. Shining removed Cadence blindfold. "Wait. Iocane doesn't work like that," questioned Cadence. "Swapped the iocane for some sleeping dust. Started working when I asked him to inhale it." Cadence replied with a flat hey. SNNZXZZ. "You said it. So how do you want to play the rest of it?" "Well, we're definitely not playing it straight. I've not terribly fond of being tortured and having 50 years of my life sucked away. Not to mention the whole mostly dead thing." Cadence added. "Right, but I do have a plan." A slightly worse for wear. Shining and Cadence emerged from the exit of the fire swamp, and Prince Blueblood, Count Sombra, and a half-dozen guards were there waiting for him. Surrender! The prince barked. You wish to surrender to me? Very well, I accept. Shining snarked back. I give you full marks for bravery. Don't make yourself a fool. Ah, but how will you capture us, especially when we have this? A pink energy shield surrounded both Shining and Cadence, forming a ball. Oh, very good. But we can wait around. Sombra replied, amused. I'm counting on that, said Shining as he and Cadence started running with the energy shield they were in, rolling forward like some bizarre hamster ball. There were gasps of shock and surprise as every pony madly ducked out of the way as it went hurling through. Ha! You missed! Blueblood's joy turned to sorrow as he saw the ball turn around and come racing back after him. Oh crud! Somehow, in all the chaos, Twilight had shown up, and was busy stunning the guards and any pony else that was left standing. Twily! You think I'd miss this? I followed you all the way here. Oh, and I needed to do one more thing. She walked over to Count Sombra and knelt over by his face. Curious, Shining and Cadence walked over as well. You made his face look like a kabuki mask. Yup. It's permanent too. Had to get my revenge somehow. / 45.6, Master Weaver. Twilight sighed. This is a sanctuary loop. There's no violence, no hate. She glowered at the green unicorn across from her. We're here to help people recover from the stresses of their home loop. We are not here to play yes men and coddle morons. The blonde colt looked right back at her. What are you saying, exactly? I'm saying that showing off is fine. You can wow the crowd with your magic, that's great. But lecturing them on your superiority? Casting Imperio. She leaned over the desk. The only reason you're not on the moon right now is because I've been to Hogwarts. I know exactly how your world runs. I knew what kind of environment you grew up in, and I know what is expected of you. Quite frankly, I pity you. A sneer formed on the green unicorn's face. No. Twilight cut him off. I took the Dark Lord on by myself and utterly destroyed him in my first fused loop. Nothing you can say will impress or terrify me. ... HRM. The sneer was gone, replaced by a carefully neutral expression. The Star Bear wasn't my fault. The Urim Minor is a standard whenever Trixie comes around, Twilight countered dismissively. We're not blaming you for that. But not even Trixie went into dark magic without being influenced by the Alicorn amulet. You've crossed a line. She smiled, a smile more suited to a carnivore. So. You're going to have some remedial lessons. Every bearer is going to teach you how to embody their element. The unicorn groaned. And here I finally thought I'd be able to get out of school. I take it you'll be enforcing these lesson plans somehow. With a smile, Twilight handed him a series of parchments. Here. Letters from Pinky when she replaced Hermione Granger. She would later privately admit that the reaction of the colt in front of her was one of the most hilarious things she had ever seen. ... I see. It gets better, she quipped. She can become an alicorn at will. The green unicorn grew a little greener. So, recap. You're going to publicly apologize to Ponyville, me and my friends are going to give you lessons on the elements of harmony, and we'll see how this goes. Twilight Sparkle smiled brightly. Welcome to Equestria, Draco Malfoy. / 45.7, Master Weaver. And the triple somersault by that unicorn was absolutely incredible. I'll admit I was a little worried when the Earth Pony filly, Apple something, jumped from that pier, but the way that the Pegasus caught her. Aha! And those batons! I don't know how they enchanted them. Even if they got outside help, the amount of things that they turned into and the flute solo was amazing. Yep, I can't even believe what did they call them, extreme gear? Extreme indeed. I've never seen anything like it. Ahoy! That finale, though, that was absolutely astounding. Obviously they couldn't have really ascended, that would be impossible, but it seemed so real. Miss Harshwini? Didn't you say something about me needing to contain my enthusiasm? / 45.8, Master Weaver. This is awkward, Smart Cookie finally said, glancing down at the necklace around her neck. Well, in retrospect, it was inevitable. I mean, we're soul-bounded. Lotta loops where that's normal have a few switches. Well, yes, but... The filly rubbed the back of her head awkwardly. It's been so long since I've had an actual body. And such a young one at that, I honestly don't know what to do. Enjoy being a foal. Go to school, look for your cutie mark, make friends with Pansy and Clover. Get covered in tree sap, I dunno. Go on, y'all deserve it. / 45.9, Oracle Mask. Well, Doctor, it's been really interesting traveling with you, Twilight Jane Smith said. This was her very first fused loop with this new universe, and it had been a challenge. There was time travel going on everywhere. A whole race of beings who worked the fabric of time and space the way Pegasus ponies handled the weather. The fact that ponies and humans coexisted on Earth was the least strange thing, but at least Twilight could run comfortably. Travel with the Doctor seemed to require lots of running. The whole universe had a weird vibe to it, though. Twilight had decided to hold off on experimenting with anything until she had a better idea of what was going on, sticking to her loop self's role. Even that had been confusing. But now, after many adventures and 7, maybe, Doctors, the loop was about to end. Right, the Doctor said, hands rubbing together. Now then, before you go popping off to that little pony universe of yours, there's one thing I probably should mention. Spike opened his mouth to ask Twilight what the plan was for this loop, only to close it again as she walked in with a pronounced eye twitch. That ugh. Bad loop? Spike asked instead. Yes, no, not really, the loop wasn't that bad, Twilight admitted, but that Doctor. He figured out I was looping, and I thought he was too. Only he isn't, he just time travels so much that he was able to bluff it out. And he didn't bother saying anything about it until end of the loop. Grumbling, Twilight reached into her subspace pocket. At least she'd managed to keep the sonic lipstick. She'd finally be able to figure out the full range of that thing's abilities, except that the sonic lipstick was gone, having been replaced with a notice. The universe you are attempting to breach is locked as read only. No items or persons may be copied, on pain of. Twilight schemed past several dozen threats from Skuld. The general theme was, on pain of pain. Hey! Great! So much for all the useful things Twilight had planned to nab from the TARDIS next time she looped in there. / 45.10, Master Weaver. Ah, that fresh new world smell. Jenny took a deep breath as she flickered into existence, sighing and smiling. Grass, live grass. Cobblestones. Hey! Magic, infusing everything. Pastoral, then? Her eyes flickered open, looking around at the small village. The creatures that lived here were only slightly shorter than humans, judging from the doors. There were pink highlights in every building, enough to be noticed, but not enough to be gaudy. Many of the doors lacked knobs, or handles, and as one of the natives wandered into her vision, tossing her curly pink mane, she realized why. Ponies. Every little girl's dream, in all the colors of the rainbow. Her eyes widened as a winged pony landed next to the pink one and chatted for a moment. She hadn't meant the rainbow comment literally, but apparently. The pony Pegasus, could it really be a Pegasus if it wasn't a horse, took off again, and Jenny followed its path with her eyes. Once more she was in awe as the pony handled the clouds in the sky. Weather manipulation was old hat to her, of course, but the way that this pony twisted and turned through the air made it clear that she was a natural at her given task. Quickly pulling a camera out of her satchel, Jenny started to film what she could of the aerial display. "Hi there!" The woman whirled and looked into the widest smile she had seen in a long time. How had the pink pony managed to sneak up on her? After a moment, realizing that no attack was forthcoming, Jenny smiled and rolled her eyes. "Hello here." "Ha! Good one." The pink pony stuck out a hoof. "I'm Pinky Mina Diane Pai, local party pony and friend to loopers everywhere. Don't worry, the anchor's going to be here this afternoon, I'll introduce you. Welcome to Equestria." Jenny grinned and took the hoof in her hand. "Jenny everywhere, shifter and drifter. Your loop's pretty nice. You got humans here?" "No, not native." Pinky tilted her head. "Actually, most other loopers that come here turn into ponies. What's up with you?" The woman sighed, looking off into the distance. "I'm a bit of an anomaly. I don't actually have a home loop, as far as I can tell, anyway." "Oh my gosh! That's sad, but it sounds exciting." "Heck yeah!" Jenny smirked at the pony. "I get to go everywhere. Krogan, elves, vampires, ninjas, ninja elf Krogan vampires. That was one weird loop I ain't seen at all, and I never will, but that won't stop me from trying." // 45.11, Chrysalis. Twilight was running over her options at the moment. The expansions seemed to be proceeding apace, and the prospect of new experiences, particularly finally learning what might be in that locked object the Tree of Harmony had produced, was quite invigorating to her. In addition, last loop she'd finally completed her little set of variants of the latest Daring Do novel, each one guest starring a different friend of hers, plus one guest starring her of course, and was looking forward to the next loop they were all together so she could give them out. Right now though, she was wondering if there was any method she hadn't yet used to deal with Sombra. While the evil stallion usually had all the mental acuity of an unrepentant drug addict who snorted crystals, the elements of harmony apparently did a number on his mind. Most loops he was an extremely evil and scary pony, the loops where he was competent. As such, Twilight felt little remorse for humiliating him in new and creative ways every chance she could get. Frankly, he deserved it. Maybe I can arrange an accidental meeting with Daring this loop and get her on board with discovering an intact lost civilization, recovering a powerful magical artifact, and defeating a despotic conqueror all at the same time. Could make for an interesting book. I wonder if I still have that. Crack. / 45.12, Crisis. Harglabth. Twilight collapsed to the ground. She tried looking around her, but immediately closed her eyes when her vision swam rather severely. She thought she was back in her tower in Canterlot, where she did research as Celestia's student prior to being sent to Ponyville, but that made no sense. She'd been in the middle of a typical, if lonely, loop, and abruptly she was here. There was no reason she could tell for the loop to have ended prematurely like that, but she felt like she'd just awoken. And in the roughest manner she'd ever experienced. In all honesty, she felt sick enough to have consumed the entire contents of Big Mac's looping stock of alcohol, as well as suffering the combined hangover that would induce at the same time. Frankly, if she hadn't garnered the mental fortitude looping inevitably provided, the pounding of her head would probably be lethal all by itself. What happened? She asked the air around her. Or tried to. It came out more like WHPPND. She thought she heard voices, but the pounding in her head drowned them out. Twilight wasn't certain how long it was before her head started to clear. The pain and disorientation rather made it hard to keep track of time, but clear it did. She opened her eyes to see the concerned faces of not only Celestia and Spike, but also the other 5 normal elements, Gilda, Trixie, as well as Luna and her daughter Nyx to boot. And to top it all off, Sleipnir, the 8-legged Yggdrasil admin assigned to their universe. Wow, She chuckled weakly. How hard did my collapse derail the timeline? She's okay. Pinky cheered. Oh, my, Twilight, Rarity gushed, you gave us all quite the scare. No kiddin' Sugar Cube, Applejack breathed a sigh of relief. Y'all been out for hours. Whatever happened to you reverberated through the elements so hard that everyone bonded to one felt it like a physical blow, Rainbow told her, looking more worried than Twilight had ever seen her. Even Gilda felt something was wrong, and she's the most recent addition to the club. Mine sister sent out the signal that she was awake and we responded promptly. Sully told us of your predicament and together we arranged for both ourself and Nyx to be brought down early to render any aid we could. We are not certain precisely why the eight-legged Locusan has come. Because I needed to be certain that Twilight was stable, the Yggdrasil admin said rather formally. She was hit rather hard with a destabilizing event and I needed to be on hand in case she required my aid recovering from this end. I am thankful that no intervention was required. You may rest easy, her regaining consciousness means any potential danger has passed. One by one, each of the visitors expressed their relief that Twilight was all right. I take it what ended the last loop wasn't normal, Twilight offered from a couch Celestia had conjured for her to rest on. No, Sleipnir agreed, it most certainly was not. Nor was your loop the only one ended so abruptly. How many Aethar loops were affected? Applejack asked, already knowing she wasn't going to like the answer. Sleipnir gazed at the gathered loopers very seriously before answering. All of them. Twilight's eyes nearly popped out of her skull. What could possibly do something like that? Sleipnir sighed and addressed the room. I will tell you all I am allowed to, but understand that the restrictions on certain sensitive information means that I am literally incapable of telling it to you. Please sit down, as this may take a while. So. Rainbow prompted after everyone was seated. What happened was that we lost another loop, Sleipnir explained solemnly, except this time it was particularly catastrophic. You mean, a whole universe, just gone? Pinky's hair deflated as she began to tear up. No more parties or loopers to have parties for. Yes, Sleipnir nodded, that is precisely what happened. Wait, Twilight interrupted, you said you lost another loop. When has this happened before? Sleipnir blinked in surprise and looked directly at Twilight in confusion. You don't remember? When Twilight shook her head, he gained a sour expression. I told her to fix that, and I'm sure she knew how. He muttered as his markings began to glow. No wonder you didn't remember a loop being lost before. Hold on a moment. Twilight did as he asked, and suddenly the memories of Madoka and her friend Homura from that loop came rushing back. Why would Madoka have not fixed her memory about such an important event if she was able to do so? Okay, Twilight reoriented herself, so someone named Madoka, whose apparently memory-proof, ascended past the dimensional boundaries of her loop. And then was reunited with the only other surviving looper in one of our loops. Indeed, Sleipnir scowled angrily. She effectively accessed Yggdrasil without authorization or training in order to arrange a fused loop here to recover her friend, potentially exposing your loop to the harmful viruses and malware that are no longer properly contained with Yggdrasil damaged as it is. As sympathetic as I am to her plight, I cannot approve of her exposing your loop to such risk. I was, as you might say, not happy. She's not dangerous, is she? Twilight asked. Her restored memories showed Madoka as friendly and very much concerned for the well-being of her friend. The idea that she was a bad individual just didn't compute. Not, inherently, Sleipnir sighed. Mostly she is misinformed about the nature of Yggdrasil's system and inexperienced in how things are done at our level. She is also potentially mentally imbalanced given her seemingly rapid acceptance of the loss of her loop. There are a number of rumors going around about her, not the least of which are regarding what happened to her friend Homura after her recovery from your loop, and I hope that some of the more sinister ones prove untrue. Of all the things we really do not need to deal with right now, an insane neophyte goddess is rather high on the list. Can anything be done to help the poor darling? Rarity asked. The backups of her universe are undamaged, Sleipnir admitted. It may be possible to restore it after the loop's end, but with the rather rapid ascension of the only viable anchor from that universe to the divine level, even if she was manipulated into doing so, restoring it at this time has been deemed to be counterproductive. Who manipulated her? Spike inquired. Her looping familiar, Kyubei, Sleipnir informed the dragon. An extremely misguided and potentially sociopathic entity dedicated to preventing the collapse of his universe by filling young souls with grief and then persuading other young souls to assist in harvesting them until they too are filled with grief. We remain uncertain if he survived the loop's destruction, and request that if you encounter him in the future that you detain him by any means necessary. Oh, he's totally not getting a pinky party, the party pony in question growled. Regardless, Sleipnir continued, the collapse of Madoka's loop was the best-case scenario possible. The most recent event was perhaps the worst-case scenario. Yggdrasil taken in the form of a tree would contain the hub in its trunk with the various prime universes, or baselines, branching out from it, and a myriad of variant universes further branching out from each of those primary branches. The anchors keep the primary branches, and all that grow from them, stable. Hub loops take place where the primary branches meet the trunk rather than the trunk itself, and many fused loops take place where two or more of the smaller tertiary branches cross one another. The collapse of Madoka's loop was like a primary branch cracking a few inches out from the trunk, while the recent collapse was more like the entire branch being ripped off the tree, taking a portion of the trunk with it. Ouch, Gilda voiced the general consensus of the room. Wait a sec, Nyx interjected. If the loops are set up with one anchor per primary branch, then how do the linked loops work? Sleipnir raised an eyebrow at the change of topic, but decided to humor the filly. Damage to the various universes after the event that initially damaged Yggdrasil was not uniform. The hub escaped damage due to being the most critical, and thus most protected, portion of Yggdrasil. And while a few other universes remained intact enough that they did not require anchoring like most, the only other universe to escape unscathed was Eiken. The entire room winced at the mention of the widely agreed most aggravating known loop. Some were damaged to the point that a single anchor was not sufficient, and so they were divided into portions and each portion anchored through the baseline. The Trek loops were the first successful linked loops brought online. Wait, Twilight interrupted. There are loopers native to the Trek loops. Yes, Sleipnir nodded. I understand they like their privacy, and rather than gain a wide variety of powers and skills like most loopers, they instead have honed their ability to remain undetected as fellow loopers. I'd tell you who they are, but it would invalidate my wager that you'll be the first to get proof. But, why? Twilight face hooved suddenly. Right. Starfleet? I beg your pardon? Asked the confused god. The Trek loopers would have to deal with Starfleet, who get reports on everything they do, Twilight explained. They regularly deal with a lot of things they can't possibly have any foreknowledge of, and anyone in Starfleet with half a brain would pick up on them acting with too much foreknowledge and launch an investigation. Which would mean they'd most likely have to explain the loops every time this happened. That got old for me after a few times trying to convince Celestia that I was looping before she awoke. I pretty much gave up except for special occasions after I'd done it a couple dozen times, and Celestia's the best case scenario. I'm not entirely sure if I should be flattered, Celestia joked. Twilight simply continued on. I know Harry Potter still hasn't forgiven Dumbledore for what he did the times Harry tried to convince him of the loops early on, and Dumbledore is still relatively benevolent if lacking in common sense. A group of superiors, some of whom may be actively hostile? Yet, I can see how they'd want to keep their looping status hidden. While the rest of the room nodded in sympathy and understanding, Sleipnir decided to get back to the topic at hand. Anyway, when the collapse affected the hub, it damaged that universe's backups. We don't know what data, if any, survived. How do backup files work in a system like Yggdrasil anyway? Twilight inquired. I mean, I doubt you actually have anything else that could store the kind of data Yggdrasil runs. Very true. Tell me, Twilight, Sleipnir said in the manner of a teacher, how do you think backup data works in a system like Yggdrasil? I can tell you that almost every loop currently running we had to fix using backup data. So where do you think it came from? Twilight thought hard for a moment before the light of comprehension dawned in her eyes. Fiction. You back up one universe in another as works of fiction. And the hub is the only universe that has fiction about every loop. Close, Sleipnir agreed. When one universe's data is stored in another as backup, the inhabitants of the hosting universe inevitably write fiction about the universe being backed up. But you're right about the hub. It's the only universe used to back up all other universes Yggdrasil runs, which is why the hub itself is being used to anchor the entire multiverse. The hub is its own anchor. Rainbow's eyes nearly crossed in confusion. How does that work? No, Sleipnir explained. The hub is the multiverse's anchor, keeping Yggdrasil itself stable through all the other anchors in the loops. As a result, damage to the hub affects the anchors through that connection and to a lesser extent the other loopers and the entire multiverse. How does the damage from this event affect us? Luna asked. The loop we lost is simply gone, Sleipnir reiterated. At the conceptual level, it effectively never existed. Any fused loops you had with that universe have now never happened. Aside from the forced system-wide reset of the loops the collapse triggered, even the divine operators of Yggdrasil have no memory of it beyond an almost completely corrupted file of the jump-start attempt with a fused loop that ended in its destruction. Eyes were wide around the room as they all tried to wrap their minds around the totality of such destruction. On a more tangible note, the divine beast continued, the emergency reset has in all likelihood set every active looper to awake status across the board, you might even have a few new loopers for added stability. It's a little hard to tell at the moment as everyone not sent to make sure the anchors were fine is running around trying to assess the full extent of any secondary damage. You said that this resulted from a fused loop as part of a jump-start attempt, Celestia cut in. What exactly does that mean? Some universes were damaged to the point that we can't get them properly anchored without the assistance of existing loopers, Sleipnir answered. I believe Fluttershy is familiar with one of the more successful anchors activated this way. You mean Lemon Rush? Fluttershy perked up. Is he okay? Are you kidding? Gilda gave Fluttershy an incredulous look. He probably took whatever floored Little Miss Friendship graduate and beat it to a pulp. Indeed, Sleipnir agreed. He is a very hardy and stable anchor. You should be proud. Fluttershy blushed. But as I was saying, the eight-legged stallion continued, the fused loop was the latest attempt to get a particularly damaged universe to start looping. The baseline suffered severe damages, and even the viable anchors are all damaged to some extent. And yes, Sleipnir rolled his eyes as he saw the inevitable tangent forming before him, this has happened before. When we have a damaged anchor candidate, it's standard procedure to move down the list to secondary and even tertiary anchor candidates to get the loop functional. Your friends the turtles are victims of a damaged baseline. Yggdrasil can no longer tell which of their major variants is the true baseline, and I understand the situation has created some rather unique mental stress issues. Your friend Sonic has been confined to variant loops because we still haven't repaired his baseline to the point where it's viable. I doubt he'd even recognize his true history at this point. What's keeping you from fixing it? Rainbow interrupted before Sleipnir could get back to the main topic. Sonic's baseline has multiversal travel outside the myriad of branching variants, which creates at least as many headaches as baseline time travel. The DC and Marvel loops were so hard to get functional that we almost set them to read-only, the absolute last resort to keep a universe from being lost. We can't get Sonic's baseline functional because not all of the universes that it interacts with in its baseline are looping yet. The universe we were trying to jumpstart is actually the last one we need to finally get Sonic's baseline fully functional. And the problem you have is... Rainbow prodded as if she hadn't distracted from the topic in the first place. The problem we have, Sleipnir answered good-naturedly, is that this particular universe was the single most critically damaged of all due to being in closest proximity to the event that caused the initial damage to Yggdrasil. All attempts to get it looping have failed, the latest, as you now know, in a manner that destroyed an existing loop. The reason why we keep trying is that we think that something in this universe may have borne witness to the event that damaged Yggdrasil and give us information that could aid in repairing the damage. Is there anything we can do to help? Twilight asked. Nothing that you do not already do, Sleipnir apologized. We can't risk any other loops collapsing through contact with this universe until we get it stabilized. And the loop that was lost. I'm afraid there's absolutely nothing you can do at all at your current dimensional level, and we'd very much prefer you don't ascend past the dimensional boundaries of your loop. Even those of you not the anchor. While the chance of your loop being lost is less than if the anchor ascends, it's still rather significant. We kind of figured. Applejack gave Sleipnir a flat stare. That's not to say what you all do isn't helpful, Sleipnir offered. Simply looping and remaining metaphysically stable helps more than I'm allowed to say. The fact that you all have, of your own volition, offered sanctuary to other loopers who visit Equestria is more than we could have ever asked of you. That you managed to succeed despite the numerous significantly dangerous hostile entities native to your loop is nothing short of a miracle. You've already managed to avert at least one potential metaphysical collapse of another anchor, likely saving Miss Clearwater's entire loop in the process. You have already gone above and beyond the duty assigned to you as loopers, and I hope you all continue to do so. I am honored beyond words to be your assigned administrator. The entire room blushed at the praise. And do keep up the antics, please. Sleipnir winked. I've won the funniest loop videos contest a few times now and I'd like to get a good winning streak going. / 45.13, Oracle Mask. Twilight stumbled. Waking up in mid-stride was always a pain, even if there were soft, fluffy clouds to land on here. And then the loop memories rolled in and Twilight completely forgot her irritation. She was in Cloudsdale's flight camp as a Pegasus filly. More importantly, for some reason Twilight was now Rainbow Dash. Literally. Looking at herself revealed she was in Dash's body. Blue mane, rainbow mane, and tail, and no cutie mark at all. Right, because Rainbow Dash had just challenged two bullies to a race for her friend Fluttershy's honor. Fluttershy seemed to be the normal non-looping Fluttershy, but Twilight would double-check her and the rest of her friends later. At the moment, a priceless opportunity had appeared. This was the race that Dash had gotten her cutie mark in. Twilight would never have a better chance to earn a different cutie mark from her usual starburst. * This was it. Twilight tore through the air as she dove for the last ring on the course, feeling the resistance from the sound barrier build, and break. Boom! Rocketing upwards, Twilight could see the sonic rain boom roll out below her. In Dash's body, she had Dash's magical signature, so it still looked the same. And as she felt the tingle on her flanks, Twilight's gaze eagerly turned to her new cutie mark. Of her familiar starburst. Granted, each star was a different color this time, but still. Oh come on! Later, Twilight would hypothesize that since the sonic rain boom had formed a connection between her and her friends, it fell under the magic of friendship. Right now, she was just incredibly disappointed. / 45.14, Master Weaver. Twilight looked around her as she awoke. Grass. The book. The tree. She laughed out loud, kissing the ground and rolling in the field. Equestria again. Thanks Celestia, Equestria again. It took her some time to stop celebrating, but eventually she managed to contain herself. She tilted her head, concentrating, and with a flash a tiara appeared on her forehead. Her face broke out into a wide grin. She quickly concentrated on ascending, then teleported off. A moment later she teleported back, carefully picking up the book, before teleporting away again. The library. Exactly as she remembered, exactly as she recalled from loop after loop after loop. She ran her hooves over the shelves, giggling like a school filly. Home. Nothing like. Her joy faded. Nothing like. That loop. Hey Twilight. Dash walked in with a smile. You're here early. I gotta admit that experiment we did was pretty neat. What are we going to do next? Twilight said nothing. The Pegasus frowned, walking up to her friend and gently poking her. Twi. It was a high school. What? My last loop. High school. Human. Nobody else awake. Rainbow Dash noticed the tremor in her voice. That kind of sounds like it would be something an egghead like you would love. I couldn't study. Twilight whirled around, tears in her eyes. Every time I tried, something happened. A guy would, or sometimes even a girl, and there were clubs. Actual clubs that people kept trying to pressure me into. I just wanted to learn. I didn't want to. The lavender alicorn folded in on herself, starting to cry. Rainbow, awkwardly, wrapped her in a hug as she rocked back and forth. You're back here, Twilight. No pony will. I'll make sure you're left alone for as long as you need it. And I couldn't stop them, she murmured. There was too much of me for them to, and the back pain, and my magic didn't work, and the force didn't work, and I couldn't access my subspace pocket. Twilight turned to her friend. We're never experimenting with the sun again. I don't want go back there. I never want to go back there. / 45.15. Well, that's just brilliant, Twilight said with a sigh. Trixie got inducted into a cult. To be honest, Chrysalis supplied, eyes somewhat unfocused, she's only pretending to go along with it. She's a good actor. Right. Mind link, of course. Twilight nodded. Any plans? I'm not entirely sure I'm permitted to attack them. Shining frowned. They're inevitables, right? Those are supposed to be things of order. And, Paladin. They're broken. Twilight shrugged. Definitely not both good and orderly, at most one of the above. Right. The Paladin touched his maul. Good to know. Hey, Gilda said suddenly. Paladins are holy warriors, right? Whose are you? Cadence waved. Is that allowed? Chrysalis asked. Apparently. I suspect Cadence might well be a favored soul of Shining, as well. Twilight drew a crude map on the floor. Okay, here's the plan. Asterisk 3, 2, 1. Wait. Cadence hissed, just before they all started casting or charging. Look. Through the slight haze of Twilight's invisibility sphere, they could see that Trixie was waving a hoof. Asterisk thank you, Trixie said, clearing her throat. Ahem. I am glad to be able to speak to the full roster of the redeemed. I would like to say something very important. The variety of crazy inevitables and cultist followers looked at her expectantly. Friends, redeemed, and fellow travelers, she began, and took a deep breath. Maximized M-powered twinned concussive sonic wild surge energy burst. Asterisk now that's what I call a distraction, Twilight said approvingly, as cultists went flying and dust rained down from the ceiling. Shut up and attack! Gilda shouted, blade already humming as she launched herself forward. Asterisk Cadence frowned down at Trixie. Are you all right? Table for 2 please. Trixie said clearly. Apparently not, she lit her horn, raised Trixie onto her hooves, and slapped a restoration spell on her. How much power did you use? All of it, Trixie said, sounding slightly hurt. Why do you even ask? Figures. Chrysalis trotted over, rolling her eyes. Okay, Trix. If you're this determined to stick to the rules of the loop, I'd better at least recharge you. Chrysalis lowered her head to touch her horn to Trixie's, and after a moment her horn lit with a soft green light. Trixie's horn answered about 10 seconds later, and a full minute passed before they separated. All fine? Trixie asked. Yep, Chrysalis replied. That's a good power combo. Twilight worked out for me, you know, full recharge is so convenient. She touched Trixie on the nose. But make sure you at least think of an escape plan next time. Escape plan? Trixie looked dubious. Why would I need one of those? Chrysalis nipped her shoulder. You know very well why. Resurrections are expensive. There was a shower of sparks in the background as Gilda and Shining took turns poking one of the inevitables. Neither of the Psions noticed. Then something flashed next to them. Trixie whirled, her horn already lit with an energy blast. Cadence. Cadence stowed the camera in her subspace pocket. That's one for the album. You looked so cute. Chrysalis sighed, tapping a hoof on the floor. It's going to take a long time to live that one down. / 45.16. Ah, I've always wanted to see the Griffin lands, Rarity said, gazing out the window. Spike chuckled, kneeling beside her. I'm fairly sure you've been before. In fact, didn't you invade once? That was just one time, Rarity replied, blushing. I had self-control issues. I know. Spike kissed her cheek, feeling an electric thrill run through him at the contact. Though they'd been dating for so long, and really serious for a large fraction of that, being actually married made it all new again. Rarity returned the favor, nuzzling into his neck. You know what I mean, of course. It's rare that we get to just look around. There was a muted whump from the gas bag of the huge airship. From experience, both of them recognized it as heated air being released from the ballonets. There goes the superheat, Spike commented. Not long until we arrive now. Rarity grinned. Not tempted to fly down? Well, a bit, he allowed. The unicorn gave it some serious thought. No, let's just use the docks as normal. It's been a long trip, and I feel like a nice dinner. I'm sorry, the waiter asked politely. You would like the vegetarian option? Yes, Rarity said patiently. I'm a pony. We don't eat meat. I am not sure that anyone has ordered the vegetarian option, since I was first hired, actually, he admitted. I will see if the chefs can remember how to do it. Not a good sign, Spike said with a wince as the griffin walked off. No, it isn't. Rarity sighed. I wonder where Blue Blood ate when he came here last. In his suite. Spike rolled his eyes. I spoke with the servants who came here with him, once. They just ate fast food. My most sincere apologies, madam, the waiter said, eyes downcast as he returned. None of the chefs can recall what an aubergine looks like in the first place, let alone how to cook it. Oh well, Spike said, shrugging, and reached into a pouch slung across his torso. Extracting a few bits, he tossed them to the waiter. Not your fault. Accepting the tip, the waiter bowed them out, still apologizing. Well, that was a bust. Rarity looked ruefully back at the five-star restaurant. I suppose that's the downside of foreign food. Gustav was all right, Spike shrugged. Maybe he left because he wasn't properly respected, though. Well, looks like it's fast food time. You know, Rarity said, staring up at the stars, I'm surprised just how many kinds of fast food the Griffins have. She levitated a nut out of their bag and slid it open with delicate care, then hovered the meat of the nut over to Spike. Spike cracked a walnut, ate the bits Rarity had passed him, then returned the favor. Well, we tend to think of the Griffin lands as a country, like ours formed from, fundamentally, a single source of colonists. But this is a continent of diverse tastes. He bit off the end of a kebab skewer, and chewed thoughtfully on the peppers, chicken and iron. How's yours? Convenient. Rarity lifted herself a little to better eat the pita. I'm a little surprised they do a vegetarian version of this, though. I think it's so you can taste the cheese. So. Rarity wiped her mouth with a napkin. What should we do tomorrow? I'm thinking, the temple complex at Hightown. You know, that one built into the side of a cliff. Sounds good. It also sounded a little scary, of course, but with Spike there, Rarity didn't feel afraid of falling. That she could literally grow wings on the way down helped, too. A little.